We'll start this morning with our reading from Whispers from Eternity. Teach me to store honey of good qualities from all soul flowers in the honeycomb of my heart. In the summer days of life, teach me to gather honey from the flowers of all spiritual qualities that blossom in the garden of truthful souls. I will store the perfume of forgiveness in the honeycomb of my heart, the lotus fragrance of humility, myrrh-scented devotion, the rare honey of all soul qualities. And even though the snowflakes of wintry experiences and earthly separations whirl about me, I shall seek thee in the honeycomb of my heart, where often I have found thee, stealing the stored honey of my devotion. Wherever thou hast come, in every place hallowed by thy feet, I will lie, touching thy footprints. Ah, there alone will I find a place of true safety. So beautiful. This morning we're talking about attunement, as we did last week as well. And in today's reading, Jesus said to his disciples, I am the vine, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branches cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye, except ye abide in me. Jesus used this metaphor with his disciples just before he left them, just before he was crucified. Most scholars believe that he used this at the Last Supper, or sometime between the Last Supper and the arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane. And what Jesus was trying to let his disciples know was that even though he wouldn't be with them physically any longer, he would be with them in spirit, that he was their nourishment. He was the sustaining quality of their lives, and he was going to oversee their spiritual development, even though he wasn't with them any longer physically. We are as closely connected to them as the branches of the vine are connected to the stem, to the great masters, to Jesus, Yogananda, to God. That is our spiritual life force, basically, to keep ourselves in attunement with that great vibration that we've been gifted in this incarnation to receive. God is truly our sustenance. So what Jesus was saying basically was keep your consciousness on me, attune yourself with my vibration at all times, because it is through me, through this ray of divine light, God's divine light, that you will find peace, inner comfort, and that you will fulfill your own spiritual destiny in this incarnation. And that's what Yogananda asks for us. We've all been blessed with this incredible Prem avatar of love, a self-realized guru who reached out to us in this lifetime or perhaps previously and let us know that he was here for us. And all we have to do is open our heart to that holy vibration, to open our heart to Master's love and Jesus's and the other gurus' love, so that we can be guided and sustained and nourished by that vine that we've been given in this, again, this incarnation. There's another part of this reading that's very interesting. Jesus says, every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. He's speaking of God. And every branch that bears fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. So we can interpret the branches of the vine in this sense as our ego qualities, because God would never cut us out of his life. God is committed to our spiritual development. So rather, he purges, cuts away all of those ego tendencies that stand in our way of feeling the sustaining qualities of God's life force flowing through us, and that intuitive perception that God brings to us through our own attunement to his vibration. And all of our actions which do bear fruit are purged by God, according to Christ in this reading. And to purge is to cleanse or to purify by separating and carrying off whatever is impure and superfluous. So it's a process of continual refinement. And that's what we're doing on the spiritual path. We're continually refining ourselves so that we can receive more of this ray of divine light that we've been gifted with by Master and the great ones. And that's really what attunement is all about. It's interesting, in the Farmer's Almanac, there's a section on pruning, and it says the more you prune, the more fruit you'll have. And it goes on to advise us gardeners, many of us amateur gardeners, that don't be afraid to prune up to 90% of the previous year's growth, because by doing that, it will ensure a higher quality product in the next season. And that's a really powerful statement when you think about it, because when we call God into our lives and ask for help, for self-transformation, that's what he does for us. God starts to prune away all of the ego tendencies that no longer serve us. He cuts away all the dead growth, all the dead wood, all of those little qualities and habits and tendencies that stand in our way. And this allows the new growth of the spiritual fruit that God provides us. So again, unconditional love for each other, peace within, calmness, perseverance on the spiritual path. It's important to remember that the times in our life that feel the hardest, the times where we have illness or we lose a loved one, or perhaps we lose our job, there's so many different ways that we can experience very catastrophic loss in our life. And I would say that's a hard pruning. We have to stay optimistic during those times, knowing that even though it's very difficult, that the spring time that will come will bear beautiful spiritual fruits for us if we can just keep our attunement always with God during those times. And we're all going through an incredibly hard pruning right now, collectively as a human species. So we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we also have great climate changes. We have social unrest happening in the world. And it would be easy to become very contracted with all that's going on, but we have to remember that we are truly blessed, that we are a chosen group of spiritual warriors, all the souls who came incarnated into this lifetime during this time of great change in the world. We came here as a blessing to make a difference and to live through this time of expansion, because ultimately, again, after this hard pruning, on the other side of this will be a beautiful time of spiritual growth and upliftment. We're in an ascending age of consciousness. So it is really remarkable to think that we are here during this time of the elevation of human consciousness, that we're here to witness it, and not only witness it, but participate in it, you know, through our love of God and through this ray that Yogananda has given all of us as devotees, that we are here to help others sort of navigate through this hard pruning, so to speak. So I'd like to take a moment and read something from Swami Kriyananda's beautiful book, a handbook on discipleship. So this is one of the books that we read and part of the process to becoming Kriyabans. And Giovanna offers sometimes individual instruction and classes on this book as part of becoming a devotee, making your discipleship on this path. So if you don't have this, and we have about 8 or 9 people currently that are working towards making Kriya initiation in about 9 months in the spring of 2021, which sounds like a long time, but it's really coming quite quickly. So I'd like to read a little section, Words of Paramhansa Yogananda. It is difficult, I'm sorry, I have to put my glasses on. It is difficult to find one's way out of a labyrinth. When you enter it, you may think, oh, I'll find my way out easily, anytime I want to. But each time you think you've found the way out, you are only led into another blind alley. You need what Theseus had. Theseus, of Greek legend, who slew the Minotaur. Ariadne gave him a thread to unreel as he was going in. That thread enabled him to retrace his steps back out. That thread symbolizes the Guru's advice and your inner attunement with him. Even mental attunement will suffice to lead you to freedom. By that sacred thread, you will be led by God's grace. So that's a really beautiful metaphor, isn't it? I like to think of our attunement to Master and the Gurus as a golden thread that connects us. The part of the story that Master didn't mention was that the princess Ariadne pleaded with Theseus. She said, make sure that you take the string and you tie it onto the door handle when you first go in. So the labyrinth and the Minotaur were all enclosed in a big walled structure because the Minotaur was deadly. It was to keep him there. And so he went in and he tied the string to the door handle to make sure that as he got deeper and deeper, he wouldn't lose the contact. And we do that every day with the Guru. We tie that string of attunement around the heart center, around our devotion to God through all of our spiritual practices. And it's really important that we keep sight of that at all times because it's so easy to become untethered in this world. There's so many distractions in the labyrinth of life. You know, as soon as we leave this Sunday service, we're all, accosted with all of these different sensory perceptions from the outside world, and just tiny little things just can pull us out, and sometimes really big things. Going back to the metaphor of the pruning of our lives, sometimes really big situations can pull us so far into the labyrinth that we forget the connection with God. But by keeping our attunement, just like that golden thread, from our heart to Master or the great Gurus, we can always be sure that we can find our way back to God easily. So some of you know that my mother had a stroke about 4 weeks ago. And we all go through these situations in life, again, that can feel very destabilizing. And I went through that myself, and my family did. But it was my attunement to Master that just helped me get through it, because to be quite honest, my mother had to have 24-hour care for the first several weeks, so that we wanted to avoid putting her into a nursing or rehab facility because of the COVID virus. So I basically moved into my mother's house. And between my mother's care and hiring, people to stay with her during the day and taking care of my teenage daughter and my job at the hospital, I really felt a little bit overwhelmed sometimes. My meditations were short and my mind was really scattered, but I kept that inner voice to God, my japa practice. I love you, God, thank you, God, Om Christ, Om Guru, kind of going throughout this whole process. And that was my golden thread. That was my tether that really helped me get through this time. And there were two insights that I had during this time that I'd like to share with you. The first one is, and we all know this, that ultimately we carry the altar of God in our hearts. It doesn't matter where we are, God is in our hearts. As Master says, we carry the portable paradise within us. And as soon as we close our eyes and we think of God or we say God's name, we come right back home. Home is the center of the heart. Home is the astral spine. So it doesn't matter where we are. We can always go back to that place. And even though we're not in a physical home, as I was, we can still find that peace within by going into that place of soul consciousness in the heart through attunement to the Guru. The other thing, which sounds like it contradicts what I just said, is the importance of creating sacred space. So in my mother's home, I created a place to meditate upstairs in the guest bedroom, but it wasn't my place. I didn't have all of the things that I like to have around me that we sometimes get attached to. But nonetheless, it was a place. But after about 2.5 weeks, I went home for the first time because one of my family members came to stay with my mother. And when I sat down on my own meditation cushion, I had this incredible wave of peace move through me. And I literally felt like tension release. And I felt this unbelievable, almost like an electromagnetic current of God's vibration within me from Master. And again, we can have that anywhere we go, but there is something about creating your own space, because every day when we meditate, we emit a vibration of divine love, and that vibration marks the ether, and that space becomes holy. We felt that when we came into this church for the first time. Those of us who came in and sat down to meditate when we were trying to decide whether or not to go forward with this, we all sat here and we all had the same experience of just this overwhelming feeling of peace, because this place had been used for worship for 150 years before us. And that's what all the holy shrines do. That's what all the holy places do. So even though these seem like two different things, they're really connected because they're really about attunement. So, even if you go somewhere overnight or on vacation, make that little sacred place, make that spot to sit in. And then, of course, in your own place, know that there is a blessing that comes from creating that place. All of us who are meditation teachers, that's one of the things we teach in our lessons, is that you want to make a little place in your home that you can sit in, that you go to each time you meditate. And when I work with people at the hospital, I tell them the same thing. And these are people who are very tired and sick. But I tell them that if you sit in the same place every day, even if you feel tired or you don't have any energy or enthusiasm, sometimes by just sitting in that place that you've created, there is this divine energy that comes through, and it can support us in our practice. One last thing I wanted to say about my mother. The stroke affected the part of her brain that controls speech and memory, and she's done remarkably well. Most of her speech has come back, but she's having trouble with memory. And last week she had a really tough evening, and in the morning she told me that she wanted to say her prayers before she went to bed, and she couldn't remember anything. And she said it made her cry, it made her feel very upset. And I said to her that it doesn't matter what the words are. It doesn't matter, because all we have to do is visualize Christ, in her case, Jesus. I said, just imagine Jesus and just say, I love you. And essentially that's what we're doing every day. If we have times in our life that throw us off balance and our meditations are short or our mind is scattered, just think of the gurus, think of God and say, I love you. And that will bring us, again, right back into that feeling of anchoring ourselves in that golden thread of attunement with the guru. And basically that's what attunement is. It's just thinking of God and offering our love to God. So in today's reading, the Bhagavad Gita verse, everyone in this world whose life is glorious or prosperous or powerful, know that his achievement is but a little spark from the great sun of my effulgence. It's such a beautiful, beautiful passage. In the Indian scriptures, God light is described as being more brilliant than the lights of 100,000 suns. And that little flame of that brilliant light lives within each and every one of us. We all contain that flame in the center of our hearts. It's just that the ego obscures it, So again, going back to the metaphor of the pruning, through our practices, through our Hong Sa practice or Kriya practice, every time that we partake in our daily meditation, the energy is moving up the spine, and it's helping to release all of the things that obscure God's light in us. I was recently talking to a friend about when we first start meditating, when we make the commitment to meditate every day, we think right away we're going to have all this joy and all this bliss, and we can have those experiences, and we do, but it's a little bit like stirring up the silt in the bottom of a pond. A lot of stuff can come up for us because it is a purification process. It's a process of moving energy through the chakras where we hold sadness, anger, fear, jealousy. There's a lot of things that come up for us, and it can be a little confusing at first, but it's a lifelong process, whether you're a new meditator or you've been meditating for more than 25 years, and in some cases 50 years. That doesn't go away. It gets easier, and maybe you have smooth sailing for longer periods of time, but there's always something in the material world that will trigger us to react, and something will come up. And it's just this process of cleansing, just purifying. And then the more we purify, the more that God's brilliance can shine through us, the more we can receive. I just want to end with one little story related to this. Many years ago, I was at Ananda Village taking a course, and throughout that week, I had been praying to Master for more, to receive more of that vibration, kind of like a little kid. I want more. And I went up to, it was after Swami Kriyananda passed away, and his apartment is now a shrine. And I went into his apartment, and he has a beautiful meditation room that's roped off, but you can look inside of it. But in his bedroom, there's a beautiful little altar at the window. Very powerful picture of Master, and some little personal artifacts that he received from Master in his lifetime with him. And I knelt down and I prostrated. I put my head down on the ground, and I felt this very powerful jolt, almost like electromagnetic energy went through my body. And when I stood up, I was dizzy and I felt nauseous. I had vertigo, and it lasted the entire day. And I really believe that that was Master's answer to my prayer. He was basically saying to me, you're receiving what you can manage right now. And that's the truth. I couldn't handle more than I already had at that point. And so that's the whole process of attunement on the spiritual path. The more that we attune ourselves to Master's ray, the more that we practice our kriyas, the more that we practice Hong Sa, we start to clean out that channel so that God's effulgence, that beautiful divine light and ray can fill us, but we can't receive more than we're ready to handle. Something to think about. So abide in me and I in you. This is a beautiful invitation from Christ that he gave to all of us. And essentially, he's just saying that by keeping our attunement on that holy vibration of God and gurus, we'll be able to open ourselves more to that divine ray by accepting the pruning, the hard pruning that comes to us through life situations, seeing that as a blessing for the fruit of spiritual qualities that will come after that. And above all, to keep our minds always focused, our minds and hearts focused on God. Om, peace. Amen.